What's up, everybody? This is the very first episode of We'll Laugh About This Tomorrow. Uh, this is going to be a series at first, and eventually it'll get to the point to where I talk about what I want to talk about. Sports, MMA, UFC, all that kind of stuff, current events, uh, whatever's going on in the world, and things that I like, things that other people like. And eventually I'll have guests, friends, and eventually like celebrities and stuff. Once I start making a bunch of money, but that's down the road. Not worried about it right now. But it's gonna be a series to start, like I said, and it's gonna be about me. It's gonna be about my life, my trials and tribulations for the last about 10 years, and the reason I want to do it as a series and explain it is because there's a lot to explain and a lot to get into. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Episode one, and maybe I'll come up with a name later on. But let's take a trip back to 2006. I used to skateboard. A lot of people in Tehachapi know that I used to skateboard. I thought I was pretty decent. I mean, I thought it was all right. It was fun. Had a lot of fun doing it. When the skate park was, new and stuff, everybody went there every day, all the time. That's all there was to do during the summer here in Tehachapi. Um, so yeah, skateboarding and doing all that stuff, jumping off the big ledges and all that good stuff. Well, I fell, twisted my knee, my right knee, uh, tore my meniscus, and whatever it was, I just thought, I got knees achy, sprained, whatever. The next day, I remember getting out of bed and being like, "Oh, what the hell? Like, this thing is jacked. I could barely stand on it." And so I ended up telling my parents. My mom takes me to an orthopedic doctor in Tehachapi. I'll leave the doctor's name out of this. Um, so we go to the doctor. He's like, "Yeah, you definitely tore something. We need to get an MRI." So we go to good old Bakersfield and we get an MRI done. They call us like 2 days later and they're like, "Oh yeah, you have a torn meniscus, a lateral meniscus torn, and which is the outsides of your knee. Kind of have it. It's kind of like a knuckle, and you want the outside of where the bones meet. That's where your cushion is, your cartilage, your meniscus. So I tore that on the outside. So whatever. And then the doctor says, "Yeah, we're gonna have to do an arthroscopy surgery, where they go in with a little scope and has a little, pretty much like a little mini chainsaw on it, and they just cut out all the tore. They take out the cut piece. If I'm explaining this right, they take out the cut piece to smooth it out, so you lose cartilage. So if you have a cut right here, they bring it down like that, so that you get rid of that torn spot. So go into surgery, come out, everything's fine. They're like, "Oh, you did good. It wasn't even as bad as we thought." Blah 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 blah. And here's a prescription for pain medication: 10 325 milligram hydrocodone, otherwise known as Norco. A little bit stronger than Vicodin, I guess. Right below oxycodone, like the Percocet and all that stuff. So I'm like, "Oh, I've never had pain medication before." So I get home, or I'm still loopy. Excuse me. I'm still loopy from the surgery, and I get home. My mom gives me the pill bottle, uh, and at first I was like, "Oh, I'll wait till it starts hurting to take one." So I do, and as soon as it starts aching, I pop a pill, and off the races we go. I had never felt so good before. I'm like, "Nah, fuck this shit. I can stand up right now. This knee ain't torn. I didn't just have surgery freaking 6 hours ago. I'm good to go." And it sent me down the path that essentially led me to doing this podcast. Um, Back in those days, in 2006, 2007, around that time, you could get pain medication so easy. I remember when I had my surgery, I had gotten a prescription before my surgery, And my mom never gave it to me for whatever reason because I was fine. I didn't really need it. Like my knee was torn, but over a little bit of time I was able to walk on it. It was just achy every day. And so then when I had my surgery and I got the other prescription, I had like I think like 200 pills after the surgery. So I went through that first 100 pills that I got after the surgery, I think within 3 weeks, and they're supposed to last a month, which I guess is kind of normal because I wasn't like getting used to them yet. So I started taking them. I started, one every 6 hours, one every 4 hours, and then it led into uh, one whenever I felt like it. And then I had buddies at the time that they'd come over, and this is like when like Call of Duty was popular, online playing Call of Duty World at War and all that good stuff. So we'd come over, we'd pass out some pain pills, and freaking dive into Call of Duty online. And we would sit there and play that shit till like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, just all geeked up on pain pills. And I would always, and then I realized like I'm like, damn, everybody likes these damn things, and I'm like, I don't really need them. I'm not in that much pain, so I started getting rid of them. And then when I went in withdrawals, I guess I didn't really go into withdrawals because when you're young like that, I honestly don't even remember going in withdrawals. Like it was like you could take them for 10 days straight, get off them, you didn't even feel nothing. And maybe because you're so active, I don't know what the science is behind that, but I remember like not even going through withdrawals back in the day like that. And so yeah, so and then every time I would run out of pills, I would just go to the doctor and be like, oh yeah, my knee's still hurting. And he'd be like, oh okay, no problem. Boom, another 100 pills, 120 pills, 90 pills, whatever. And and they were always the same, 10, 325 Norcos every time. Not even like didn't even flinch. Like he's like, oh yeah, no problem. Boom, here you go. I would literally go back at one point. I was literally going back every like 2 weeks to get a script for 120 pills. I was going through 120 pills every 2 weeks. I mean, not trying to, not hold myself accountable, but I would get rid of a lot of them, but I'd also keep some for myself. Of course, I had to keep some for myself. And so then it just turns into like, okay, now Nick can get pills. He got pain pills. He can, whatever, hit up Nick. And so I'm getting rid of them and then keeping them for myself as well. And then once my knee heals, the doctor's finally like, I remember one appointment I go in, I'm like, yeah, it's still bugging me. Like, I can't sleep at night, this and that. And just using all these excuses, but I was perfectly fine. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to give you a little bit less, try not to take them as much. Just take them at night, da 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 da. So I end up doing that. And that ends up being like oh man, that ends up being like the whole, like, okay, he's not going to give them to me as much, like whatever, I'm just going to only get rid of them at this point, and I don't need to take them anymore. So that's what I end up doing. And so fast forward a couple years, I'm fine, no injuries, I'm not even taking the Norcos anymore. But every time somebody in my friend group gets hurt and they get pain pills, it's like, hey, come over to my house, let's fucking hang out and take some pills, play video games, whatever, bullshit, chat, till wee hours of the night. And so it was kind of like on and off taking them whenever people would get them. And I remember one night, me and a buddy were super bored at my house, and there was nothing going on in Tehachapi like normal on most summer nights. And he's like, my buddy tells me, he's like, hey, dude, I can get some Percocet. I'm like, you want to get some? And I'm like, well, shit, I don't know. I've never tried those before. He goes, oh, dude, I heard they're bomb. Like, they're super good. And I'm like, well, screw it. Let's get them. And the guy's like, oh, well, he wants like $5 a pill. And at the time, I know Norcos were going for like $2 to $3 a pill. So $5 a pill was like, geez, that's crazy. And, but I'm like, screw it, whatever. I'm on disability at this point. So like I have just free income essentially. I don't have any bills. My parents are paying my bills. I'm living in their downstairs. And, yeah, so we end up getting, I don't remember how many, but we ended up getting a bunch. And we go meet this sketchy ass dude that he knows, get a baggie full of pills, and then They're like, oh, let's just go for a drive. Like, let's take some just to zone out and go for a drive. So I'm like, all right, screw it, whatever, let's do it. So we both take, I think both took two at once because at this time, Norcos, we were taking two or three at a time. So we're thinking Percocet, like, oh, just do the same thing. It's a different medication, but it's 10, 325 milligrams, same shit. Little do we know that we took two and we were both looped. Within a matter of 30, 40 minutes, we were both looped out. And we're like, these are the shit. These Percocets are way better than Norcos. Like, I need to tell my doctor to give me these when I get hurt next time. So I remember I remember me and two other buddies were all looped out on Percocet, just driving through the mountains of Alpine Forest. Like every weird road we find, we would just turn on and just start driving down it. And we would do that every night for a while in the summer when there's nothing going on. Like, oh, it's good, let's just go drive around the mountains. And we did that for a while. So I remember one night we're like, we didn't have any money for gas, so we're like, oh, let's just go play some Call of Duty. So we go back to my house. We still have some of those Percocets, and this is the first time that I bumped one, snorted it, crushed it up on a table. Me and my buddy crushed it up, and you know, freaking snorted it. And to me, it felt the same. There was no difference, and it tastes like shit. And that was the first and last time I ever snorted pain medication. And my buddy would always do it, but whatever. He must have liked it. I never liked it. So fast forward, I'm partying, doing all kinds of mischievous things, and I go to a party one time, and a buddy introduces me to cocaine. So the first time I do cocaine, and the same thing with Norcos and the Percocets. This is the best shit ever, and you can drink all night on it. You can drink all night. You're doing cocaine and all this stuff, and we're just drinking all night, playing beer pong, playing drinking games, not even feeling drunk, and just back to the bathroom, back and forth to the bathroom. And we know tons of people knew it, like, oh, those guys are doing this, those guys are doing that. And I partied like that for probably, I would say, 2007 to 2000, maybe 2009, and 2009. And then this is where, like, I'm getting to the point to where I'm getting older. I'm in my 20s now. I'm 22, 23 years old. And I'm at the point where, like, I'm over this partying. Like, a lot of the friends I would hang out with are either gone or just went into other drugs like meth and all kinds of crazy shit. And I'm like, I really only hang out with, certain people. And at sometimes I was just going to parties by myself because I didn't want to sit at home. And around 2009, probably like mid 2009, I go to a party, and I'm at this party, and I was friends with this chick. She was probably like my only friend at the time, and she was kind of tomboyish. Everybody knows who she is. And me and her were like, Bonnie and Clyde. We would do all kinds of dumb shit and party and whatever. Well, she had this friend that I always wanted to get with. So we end up going to this party in 2009. She's already there, and I call her. I'm like, hey, what's going on tonight? And she's like, oh, there's this party there. And I'm like, oh, tell her I'm coming. And they're like, oh, I don't think it's a good idea. Like, this person's here that doesn't like you. This person here doesn't like you. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I'm coming. And so I end up going there, and I meet my wife for the first time. And it's funny looking back on it now because I remember walking into the party, and it was I was always that outgoing person, right? Get the party going if it was being lame. And I remember walking in, and a bunch of the girls I was friends with like, oh, Nick's here, dance party time. And I sure as shit go and put music on and start getting everybody dancing. And I remember noticing my wife and like probably looking at me like I'm an idiot, or like, this guy is exactly who everybody says he is. Just tries to hook up with girls, it does drugs, and this is all his life is, partying. And at the moment, that's what it was. It was girls, partying, and not worrying about anything else in life. I think every guy at that age goes through that stage. So I meet my wife. I end up talking to her. I introduced myself at at her party. I end up talking to her for like 2 hours. Like she's ignoring everybody else. I'm ignoring everybody else. We're just like sitting in the party talking to each other. Now that I think about it, it's like, it's one of those scenes in the movie where two people are talking and everything's just time lapsed around them, like everybody's moving like ants around them. That's how it felt. And we're sitting there talking. I get her number, and and everybody ends up leaving. So I take off, and we go to this other party, and I end up passing out at that other party. And I wake up in the morning, and the first thing on my mind is my wife. So I text her. Well, she wasn't my wife at this time. So I text her, hey, da, 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 we should hang out. She's like, I don't know, like maybe I got stuff going on. And then my friend, the other girl that was my friend, that was friends with my wife, uh, I text her and I'm like, hey, tell her to hang out with me. Like she keeps like kind of like being weird about it. Da, da, da. It's like, oh, she doesn't want to hang out with you. She doesn't want to be alone with you. It's like she keeps saying like she'll hang out with you, but only if I'm there. And I'm like, oh, this is retarded and ridiculous. So I end up getting to hang out with her, and the other girl comes with us. And then, like, 10 minutes in, the other girl's like, "Oh, I gotta go." So she kind of like she did it for me. She set it up for me so I could hang out with my future wife alone. And it was really funny because like my move back in the day was if I got alone with the chick, I would always put the longest movie I could think of on. And the movie I picked when we were at her house was Titanic. I'm like, oh, perfect. Titanic's like an 8 hour movie. And I have plenty of time to make a move and this and that and be golden. I literally sat there almost the whole entire movie afraid to touch my wife's hand, afraid to like get closer, afraid to make a move. And I'm thinking to myself in my mind, I'm like, dude, something's wrong with me. Like, what the heck is going on? Something's wrong with me. Like, this is not me. Like, I would already left by now. You know what I mean? I would have hit it and been back home or hanging out with buddies. So the whole time I'm sitting there, I can't make a move. I'm getting all flustered. And before I know it, the movie ends. And I'm like, dude, I literally just watched that whole movie. Didn't make a move on my wife. Didn't do anything. I'm like, this is not me. So she walks me to the door. And I remember I turn around and I know she was totally, totally meaning, like totally wanted me to kiss her. And I just like look at her and I'm like, okay, well, I'll hit you tomorrow. And I'll walk away. And I remember getting in my car and driving down the street and I'm like, what the heck is wrong with me? What the heck is wrong with me? So I go to my buddy's house that lives like not that far from her. And I get there and he's like, hey, what's up, man? Did it go down? This. And I'm like, no, man, I couldn't make a move. And he's like, what? He's like, dude, you're crazy. He's like, you were there forever. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I couldn't do it. I was like flustered. I couldn't make a move. And he's like, oh, you're a bitch. You're a pussy. Da, da, da. And I was like, you know what? Fuck this. So I get back in my car. I go back to her house. And I'm like, I'm just going to open the door and kiss her. I'm going to open the door and kiss her. So I get down there. She opens the door. And I just, boom, grabbed her. I grabbed her and kissed her. And then I went to leave. But she like kind of left the door open. So I was like, screw it. I'm going inside. So I went inside. And yeah, that story leads where everybody thinks it leads. So then she lived in down by the beach, like Huntington Beach, Seal Beach, down there at the time. She was going to school. So she wasn't in Tehachapi. She had just came up that weekend for whatever reason. So she goes back home. We stay talking. Now I have this girl that I really like. She's not my girlfriend yet, but like I really like her. She ends up coming up, I think like the next weekend or another weekend, and goes to that. My friend that's a girl. Ends up going to her house, and we end up getting stuff for dinner, and I make steaks and stuff, and cook and all this good stuff, and like I'm flirting with her the whole time, hitting on her the whole time, this and this. And I remember telling her at like the end of the night, I'm like, oh, I want you to be my girl. I want you to be my girl. And she's like, oh, I don't even know you. Da da da. Like I live there, this and that, and blah blah blah. And I remember just like talking her into it. Like I kept just trying to talk her into it. Excuse me. And I'm talking her into it. She's just like, whatever. She's focused, which is a good thing. Looking back on it now, like she was focused. She wanted to finish school. She wanted to live by the beach and finish school and do her thing. And I just wanted a girlfriend, or I just wanted a relationship. I was tired of chasing chicks around and doing all this dumb shit. So she went back there and she was like, "Oh, I'm not gonna be back up for a while." So, well, like I'm like, "Screw it then. I'm gonna end up, you know, I'm gonna go down there and see what's going on." So I go down there and I visit her one weekend, and it's really funny because the weekend I go down there, her mom, her brother, my brother-in-law, he's a professional BMX rider, and he was doing this competition in San Diego, which is on the way, you know, going past my wife's house. And the weekend I went down there to visit her, her mom was coming to pick her up to go to the competition, to her brother's competition with them. So like the day I'm there, I don't even remember if I spent the night. I don't know. So my one of my best friends lived in Huntington at the time, so I was going there to hang out with my wife, and then I was gonna go stay at my best friend's house. So the like right at the time I'm like we're getting ready to leave, like her mom pulls up, and this is the first time her mom sees me, and I'm just like a skater kid, like I look like a complete idiot, tall tee, baggy pants, hat backwards, look like a clown. And this is the first time she sees me, and I'm just kind of like, oh, hey. Didn't even introduce, like, she was just like, whatever, like, she just wanted Jamie to get in the car and get the hell out of there. So I remember they take off, and uh, I end up going to my best friend's house, and I remember we start drinking at my best friend's house, and I'll never forget this. I still have pictures of this. It's pretty funny. So we're at my best friend's house, and I get all hammered, and I like take my shirt off, and I walk outside, and my buddy just starts busting up laughing, and he's like, dude, what the hell happened to your back? Like it looks like you got in a fight with a fucking cheetah. And he took a picture of me. I remember with my back towards the camera, and he's like pointing with a big old shit-eating grin because my wife had just scratched the shit out of my back. We were wrestling in the living room, no big deal, and she had nails. And so yeah, so fast forward, I go back home. Uh, Things are getting serious between me and my wife, and she ends up uh, moving back. I don't even remember exactly why. I think it's something to do with uh, her mom not thinking she was staying focused or something. So she made her move back home, but she was still going to school in LA. So she was driving, I think 4 days a week, 3 or 4 days a week to LA every week to go to school, and then she'd come back to Tehachapi. To me, I'm like, oh, this is perfect. That this girl that I want is in Tehachapi all the time now. So we end up hitting it off. We end up dating. We're going out now, and me bringing this party lifestyle to this mature, young woman that's trying to go to school and get her career in her mind and all that stuff handled. And I'm just like, I I'm still young. I don't have to worry about that stuff. I'm just gonna party and hang out with my friends, and then have this girlfriend that I can hang out with when my friends don't want to hang out or they're busy. I have the girlfriend, whatever. And I remember I talked her into throwing this party at her house, and it was basically like all my friends. Like I think two of her friends showed up, and then we played beer pong. Everybody gets drunk, and at this point, me and my wife had been together for almost a year, and yeah, almost a year. So I'm talking about like marriage. I want to marry her, and I want to be with her forever, and all this good stuff. So I end up talking to her dad. The Well, actually, hold on. Let's back up a little bit. So actually, at that party, I know it's at that party because uh, I know my skills. She ends up getting pregnant. She ends up getting pregnant, and uh, she's freaking out. And I'll never forget this either. I remember I'm hanging out at her house, and she takes a pregnancy test because she's freaking out, and she comes in and she goes, I'm pregnant. And she's like crying, like all willed up and about to cry. And she's like, "What are we gonna do?" I'm like, "I don't know." I'm like, "Well, I guess you're pregnant." Like I was just so nonchalant about it, and she just pissed her off, pissed her off extremely. And she's like, well, like I need some feedback from you. Like what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? I'm like, I will do whatever you want to do, and let's just go from there. Like it's a life changing thing, but at the same time, it's like, well, what are we gonna do? You know? And so then we have to go tell all our parents. I remember going to tell my parents. My parents, I think, knew like pretty much right off the bat. Like I remember saying, "Oh, I want to talk. I need to talk to you guys." And I remember my mom be like, "Oh, she's pregnant, huh?" And I'm like, "Yep." And I remember my mom saying like, "Well, yeah, I guess you gotta get a job and get your life straightened out, blah blah blah." And yeah, and then she calls me and she's like, "So my mom wants to talk to you, and then my dad's dad wants to go to lunch." And I was like, "Okay." So we go talk to her mom. Her mom's like, "What are you guys gonna do? This and that." Like, being super serious, mother-in-law. And at the time, like, I didn't have that much of a relationship with her mom. Like, her mom worked a lot. Like, I was only over there when Jamie was home, and so she was at school most of the time. And during the daytime when she wasn't going to school, her mom was at work, so I didn't see her mom that much. And I remember going to lunch with her dad. This is the first time meeting her dad. We meet him. He used to own a tire shop in town. We meet him at the tire shop. Like, he comes out, gives my wife a hug. Like, all right, let's get in the truck. We'll go eat. So we get in the truck. I'm sitting in the back seat, like he didn't even introduce himself. I'm like, whatever. Like, I'm like, fuck this shit, you know. And so the first time I get out, I shake his hand, and I'm like, hey, Nick, hey, I'm Nick. I got your daughter pregnant. Nice to meet you. I remember, and he was kind of funny when I think about it now, because we just sat down eating, and like we started eating, and I remember he just stops and he's like, okay, well, you got to get a job. What have you done before? And I'm like, oh, the only job I had at the time was I worked at Kmart for like 8 months, and then I left Kmart to go get a job in the working on wind turbines, and I only did that for like maybe a year, and then I came back, had a bunch of money saved up, and didn't uh, worked in the wind industry. Did it for a year, and then I came back, and then that's when I hurt my knee the first time. So so now I'm in job mode. I stopped partying. I stopped doing all these things. I'm like, now I have a kid on the way. I want to marry this girl, all this stuff. So I end up proposing to her. We went out to the bench in Stallion Springs. If you're from Tehachapi, you know where that place is. It's just a bench that looks over this mountain. It's a really cool spot. End up proposing to her there, and almost falling down the hill and killing myself. And then fast forward a couple months, I'm job hunting. I'm trying to get a job in the wind industry with what little experience I have. And then I kind of snuck my way into one of the wind companies that was local, so I didn't have to travel. And I end up getting a job there, and I'm about working there for 4 years. My son's born. Everything's good. Um, and I'm one day in the middle of winter in Tehachapi, which still makes it winter in Mojave. It was snowing in Mojave on the wind site, and one of the hatches of the wind turbine was open, and snow was coming in and hitting the ladder. And I climbed up to assist my partner. I mean, that's why the hatch was open, because he had to go out the hatch to work on something, and so the snow kept coming into the hatch. So he needed my assistance, so I go climb up. And as I'm climbing up, I get to the last section, and there's snow all over it. I don't even pay attention. I go to climb up. I go to pull myself up, and I slip. Well, everybody knows how a ladder is. You got your rungs. My left leg goes in between the rung, and then my harness that's hooked off, so if I fall, it catches me. Well, the way it was tied off, it catches me and swings me around the ladder, and my leg is in between the ladder, so it just completely makes my like knee do a 180, my left knee. Agonizing pain, cussing up a storm. My partner pokes his head in and is like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, I just fucking fell. Like, my knee is jacked. It's throbbing. And I remember, if he listens to this, he'll laugh, because his name was Ricky. He goes, oh, you all right? Can you get down? I'm like, yeah, I can climb down. He's like, all right, cool. Yeah, I got it anyways. I don't need your help. And I'm like, you mother fucker. Like, I just climbed up for no damn reason and ruined my knee. So I make my way down. It takes me quite a while to get down. I remember getting in the truck and it's snowing outside. And I remember getting in the truck and I'm like crap, I need to take off these coveralls and see what my knee looks like. So I like hop on the bed and I take off my coveralls and my knee's just boom, swollen. So I call the boss. The boss comes out and gets me, takes me back to the shop, and he's like, "How you feel?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. Like, I'm not a doctor. I don't know if I just banged my knee on the ladder or what. All I know is that it's hurting." So he sends me home. I come into work the next day, and they ask me like, "How's your knee?" And I'm like, "Oh, dude, it's throbbing. It's still swollen." So they're like, "Okay, we're going to the doctor." So they put me in a company car, and one of the site leads takes me out to the doctor in uh, Lancaster, California. So I see this doctor, and he's like, "Yeah, your knee's something's definitely wrong with your knee. We need to get an MRI. How bad's your pain?" I'm like, "Oh, it's hurting pretty bad." And he's like, "Okay, here's a script for 120 Norcos. Same thing I had before, just 4 or 5 years earlier. Or no, actually more than that, almost 8 years earlier." And so I'm like, "Oh, I know about these things." And I remember uh, asking the site lead, like, "Hey, can we grab some food?" And I already had the prescription because at that time, some doctors would just have the prescriptions in their office. You wouldn't even have to go to a pharmacy to fill it. And so I already had the prescription. And I remember going into to a Carl's Jr. right there by the doctor's office, and I go into the bathroom and take a couple pills to alleviate my pain, but also because I know it's gonna make me feel good. So I get in this car and we head back to site, and they're like, "Okay, like you'll be off work until further notice. Like the doctor will let us know. We need to start a workers' comp case. Blah 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 blah." So I'm like, "Okay, well, you guys tell me what to do, what I need to do to, what I need to give you, and all that good stuff." Because the doctor was their choosing, so it was a workers' comp doc. I technically didn't have to do anything but go to my doctor's appointments to get checked out and figure out what's going on, and then they would report back to my job. So I go home. Um, I get put on workers' comp, so I'm getting like it's like workers' comp disability. So they pay me like I think it's like 70% of your wage or something like that. Don't quote me on that. And I'm barely making less than what I would on a paycheck. So to me, it's like I'm on vacation. My wife at this time, she's like, "Well, shit." Like now, like she doesn't know. She just knows that my knee is jacked up, and I'm gonna have to heal or I'm gonna have to get an MRI, whatever. So fast forward, like maybe like a week or two later, the doctor calls and says, "Okay, it's like we got you scheduled for an MRI." So I go in, get an MRI, and a couple days later they call me, and same thing. Lateral meniscus is torn, but this time it's my left knee. My right knee is fine. So the doctor that did my first surgery on my right knee nailed it. Uh, Left knee, they're like, it's torn pretty bad. We'll have to do surgery, do arthroscope again, same thing as the right knee. So I'm like, "Oh, okay, whatever. Walk in the park. I know how it is." So they schedule the surgery. In the meantime, I'm getting all kinds of pain pills, and at this point, pain pills are still pretty readily available. And this is the first time I go through withdrawal. So he allows me to go back to work. I'm taking Norcos at the time. At this point, I think I'm taking like 3 or 4 a day. Um, and he allows me to go back to work on light duty. So I remember running out of my pills the day before, and I go to work, and it's like maybe 10 in the morning, 11 in the morning, and I remember just starting to feel like crap. And I'm like, "What the heck is wrong with me?" Like I just felt all lethargic. My back was hurting. I was getting all sweaty, and so I tell the guy that I'm working with, like I feel like crap, dude. I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. So I go back to the office. I tell my lead, and at this point, I knew it was the pills that was causing this. Like I needed to get some pills so I stopped feeling like crap. Well, I didn't have any more. So then I go back. I tell my lead, I'm like, "Oh, my knee is killing me. Like I need to go to the doctor. Like I just called them. They want me to come in." And he's like, "Well, why would they do that? Why would they just randomly make you come in? Like they usually do appointments." Da 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 da. So I'm just plain out lying to my boss. I'm like, "Oh no, they just called me. They told me that I had to come in. I had to come in." So he's like, okay, well, like, okay, go ahead, take off. So I take off. I go down to their office. I tell them, I'm like, oh, my knee is killing me. Like the meds you gave me aren't working. Because I know if I tell them I took them all, they're not going to give me more. And so he's like, okay, well, let's try these. So then he gives me, um, what did he give me? Oh, he gave me like Tylenol number threes with codeine or something like that. And he's all just take these for a week and then come back and if the I'll give you stronger Norcos because I remember he gave me like 5 325, so it was only 5 milligram Norcos, and I was used to taking the 10, so that's why I went through them so quick. So he gives me the codeine. I remember taking those like within like 3 days, like taking them all gone. But I didn't go through withdrawals because those, to me, those weren't that strong, so it almost helped me get through the withdrawals, and then I was fine. And so I end up going back to the doctor. He gives me another script for 120 pills, and then he takes me back out of work. And he's like, "Okay, well your knee's torn too bad for you to be at work. Like it's just gonna make it worse. So we just need to hurry up and schedule your surgery." So they get the surgery on the books. They schedule the surgery, and it's all set and done. So my wife wakes me up at 4 in the morning. We drive down to LA to do the surgery. We get there at 6 o'clock, or 6 o'clock was my surgery time. And I'll never forget this. I remember my wife saying, she goes, "Yeah, they called you back, and I went back with you, and they like talked to you for a sec and drew on your leg, and then they'd be like, and then they were like, okay, we're gonna take you back in a couple minutes." And then I remember looking at my clock, and it was like 6:15, and they're like, okay, we're gonna take him back. So then I leave, and she's like, "I shit you not." It was like maybe 40 minutes later, they come out and they're like, "Oh, he's all done. You can come back in a sec." And I'm like, 40 minutes? I'm like, man, that was like really quick surgery. I didn't think nothing of it at the time. I'm just like, oh, whatever. It must not have been that bad or something, whatever. So she comes back. I'm all loopy. And she said, I asked the doctor how it went. He was like, oh, it's fine. We got all of it out. You should be good to go. So, so I'm like, ah, cool, whatever, whatever at this point. Like, I don't care. And then as soon as I like kind of come to, my knee starts throbbing, and I had Norcos at this time. And I remember telling the doctor in the post-op room, like, hey, the Norcos aren't working. And he's like, okay, just stop by the office and I'll tell him to give you something else. So on the way back from LA, we stop at the office, and then they give me 10 325 Percocet. So I'm like, oh, this shit is way stronger. And I think they gave me like 80 of them. And so I was like, oh, I got freaking good ass ones this time. So I go home, um, chilling on the couch, playing video games, the whole cycle of the same time when I had my right knee surgery. And we're going on. Well, this 2012 is when the accident happened. So towards the end of 2012, um, I'm in physical therapy. My knee is legitimately hurting still. I haven't even been taking that many painkillers, but then I start taking them again because my knee's actually hurting. And I go back to the doctor, and I'm like, yeah, my knee's still killing me. Like I can't be that active. I can only be active for maybe a couple hours during the day, and then it just starts hurting too bad, where I have to stop. And the doctor straight up calls me a liar. He's like, no, he's like, I did the surgery. If you did your physical therapy right, like your knee should be fine. There's no way you're in pain. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you're my doctor. I'm in pain. And he tells me, he's like, no, you're not in pain. Like, I'm not giving you anything else for pain medication. Like, you should just do your physical therapy and you should be fine. So I end up doing all the therapy, and my knee is just still killing me. So I tell the workers' comp uh, case guy that I need to see another doctor because this doctor doesn't think I'm in pain and something's seriously wrong with my knee. So I remember calling the doctor that did my first knee surgery, and I'm like, hey, do you guys take workers' comp cases? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, can I have a case transferred to you? Gave them the whole rundown. I'm like, this guy did surgery. It's 6 months later. My knee's still killing me. Like, something's going on. And they're like, yeah, usually we don't take transfers, but since you were a former patient, the doctor should do it. So that doctor ends up doing it. So then I get transferred, and then I get another doctor that's just like immediately gives me more pain pills, and I believe it was Norcos. I remember Norcos being like the main thing I was getting for a long time, and like the Percocet was like it was a perk. It was like, oh sweet, I get something stronger. And so he sends me to another MRI, and this is 6 months after the first surgery on my left knee. He sends me to an MRI. They call me into the office. They're like, okay, can you come in? Whatever. So I come in. They're like, yeah, your knee is torn. Like you still have a tear in your knee. And he's all, and you can see in the MRI, you can see like a bunch of floaties, like they look like little flares. And he's like, it doesn't look like he got it all. And he's like, so we need to do surgery. And they're like, we'll do it next week. So like really quick. And so we go do the knee surgery. I come out, um, same old process, and then I go to my follow up appointment to see the actual surgeon, and he's like, dude, whatever doctor that was that did that first surgery on your knee, he's all, they literally didn't do anything. He's all, you had scar tissue where they went in with the scope, and like two marks I could see where they made marks with the scope, and then another puncture room and another puncture room. He's like, but your tear, he's like, I've been doing this for a long time, and he's like, your tear was untouched. It was an untouched tear. It had never, because he's like, I know what a tear looks like that's been touched by a scope. So he tells me this, and I'm like, okay, so it's a botched surgery. He's like, yep, it's a botched surgery. Your knee is exactly the same. He's like, but I did the best I could. The tear was worse because he did that, and now you're real low on cartilage in there. Like you're gonna need to like take it easy, do physical therapy, all that fun stuff. And so I'm like, okay, well then it is what it is. So I started doing physical therapy. Towards the end of physical therapy, my knee starts like aching. Not as bad, but it starts aching and all that. And I remember going back to the doctor. I'm like, my knee's still aching, and he's like, well, we can't really do anything else. Like the workers' comp has to allow us to do more things and do more MRIs and all this stuff. And then I get a call from the workers' comp, and they're like, okay, you've had two knee surgeries. How's your knee doing? I'm like, well, it's still achy. Like, I think I might need more work done. And they're like, okay, well, we want to settle the case. Like, we just need to finish this. And at this point, I was trying to stay on workers' comp in a sense because the company I worked for sold the site I worked on. So I didn't even have a job to go back to. And I was still getting essentially the same pay from workers' comp. And so I was kind of trying to milk it for all it was worth. And then I just made the decision, me and my wife, I'm like, well, screw it. I'm not going to have another surgery because it's just going to make it worse. And I need to just find another job while this workers' comp is still available, and then we can settle. So I end up finding a job with another wind company, and this is 20, 2016, and get another job with a wind company. I tell the workers' comp place like, okay, let's settle. Like, shoot me some offers. I had a lawyer and all that stuff. So a lawyer calls me like, hey, they want to offer you this, blah blah blah. I tell her no. She goes back, fights for more, gets more. I settle. So in the agreement was I was taking this lump sum of money with no medical treatment paid for by them for the rest of my life, or I could have took medical treatment for my knee for the rest of my life and no money. And at the time, I'm like, screw that. Like, I have insurance. I can get insurance, whatever. So I take the money, and now I'm working, and I'm not taking any pain pills at this time. And then I remember coming home because I had to travel with the job I got. I had to travel. I remember coming home and like hurting myself doing something. I think it was I went dirt bike riding with some friends, and I hurt my ankle or something. It was bad, and I ended up getting some pain pills. And this is pretty much where it starts, right? For me, this is where it started. I'm two knee surgeries deep on my left, one knee surgery deep on my right, and I'm at the point where I can't have another surgery because my knee is already damaged as it is. But I'm taking pain pills like M&Ms, and not because it hurts, because I'm addicted. I'm addicted to pain pills at this point. I'm dependent on them, um, and that's where this series is headed. I mean, I'm sure if you guys didn't catch the drift by now, I mean, I kind of painted a picture, but I wanted to give you a backstory on how this all starts. And I know it starts like this for a lot of people. A lot of people get hurt. They get some strong painkiller prescribed by a doctor because doctors didn't know back then, and then they become addicted. And that's what happened to me. Started out with Norcos, And then I got Percocets every now and then, back to Norcos. And I know some people, go to heroin, go to all this crazy stuff. But Norcos were fine for me. But to me, it doesn't make it any less of an addiction. I had an addiction to pain medication, and the pain medication at the time was Norco. So with this series, I'm going to talk about my addiction, talk about the things I went through, talk about all the crazy stuff I did, so you kind of know about me. You know my backstory. You know where I'm going with this and where my life is now. Um, I was on pain medication for almost 11 years. I'm sober now. I'm 34 years old. I started taking them when I was around 23, 24. And now I have the whole future to look forward to. All because I stopped taking these things and got off of them. And I'll tell you about it because it was hell. Like I said, I don't know how many episodes of this I'll do, but it'll be good. It'll be a cool series, and hopefully it helps somebody. That's my goal. Hopefully it helps somebody dealing with the same things as me, and they're able to push forward or get past something in their life. And yeah, so I'll see you next week with episode 2. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and it's only going to get funner and crazier from here. My name's Nick Sigston. I'm your host, and we'll laugh about this tomorrow.